First off, what you need to make sure you know is that what amplitude is. Okay, so you need to know what the amplitude is. When you're looking at the function, your amplitude is defined by the absolute value of your A. Second, you need to know what your period is, or how to find a period. Remember, period is how long it takes for your cycle to repeat. Okay? So your period is defined by 2 pi over b. Third, you need to know what a horizontal. Sometimes it's going to be called a phase shift. So if it says phase on your test, know that it means horizontal. 4, you need to know what vertical shift is. So when we're talking about this would be my H, and this would be my K. Okay, you need to know what max and min are, and that your max and min is defined by which axis?
Y.
Your y axis. What else did I write? Okay, you need to know what x-intercepts are. Huh? No, because you should know this, so you shouldn't need to write it on your note card. You should already know this stuff, so you shouldn't have to write it on your note card. You only write things on the note card that you're unsure of. All right? Your x-intercepts are when your function crossed the what axis? X-axis. Hit the name. All right. 7. You need to know that when you see this symbol, theta, that it means an unknown angle. So just any given angle. But when you put it in the calculator, you can't put theta. You actually just put a x to graph it. F of theta is f of x. Alright, you also need to know that if for some reason you need to graph or solve sine, cosine, tangent, cosecant, secant, cotangent.
Can I come out to school and get my spiral back?
Yes.
Oh, you gonna have them graded by the end?
Yes, my plan is to have them graded by the end of 6th period.
Oh,
That's my plan. Okay? To get to these on your calculator, you press the what button?
Trig.
Trig button.
I'm looking.
So when you're wondering, where's all of this? Press the trig button. It'll make your life so much easier. Okay, next, you need to make sure you understand when graphing that you have to put double parentheses. Remember we talked about that? You have to put it double parentheses and then put your B parentheses, your X plus your H plus your K. Okay, so be conscious of your parentheses. Okay. If you do not put the parentheses, your graph will come out wrong. Okay? Don't say I didn't warn you. Next, we need to go over reciprocals. Trigonometric reciprocals. Okay, when you're looking for the reciprocals of trig function, for example, the reciprocal of sine is cosecant. The reciprocal of cosine is secant, and the reciprocal of tangent is cotangent. And when you use the word reciprocal, that means you're doing what to the value? You're flipping the value, right? So if I say that the sine of an angle is 2, what would be the cosecant of that angle? It would be a half. Good job, here. Okay? So if the sine is 2, then the cosecant would have to be 1/2. If for cosine here, if it was 2 over 3, then my secant would have to be. And if it was here, if it was a negative 1 over 4, then my cotangent would be negative 4. Okay? You're literally just taking the fraction in, flip it. So if you know one, then you know the other. Okay, you also need to be able to recall what an asymptote is.
Bro, I always laugh when she said she did that Harry Potter thing, bro. I swear I be thinking about that all the time.
Don't judge me. Alright, asymptotes. So with asymptotes, you have, you need to just basically look at your, what's that parent function book we made? Remember that?
Yes.
In the parent function book, you can see the asymptotes, and it tells you where your asymptotes are. Okay? And if in the calculator, they will say undefined, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about knowing what an asymptote looks like and what shapes, what trig functions have asymptotes. Again, that's in your parent function notebook. All right, last thing, and this is why your unit circle is important. Last thing is, on your test, it's going to ask for exact values. Which means you can't just plug it into the calculator. Okay? When it asks for exact values, that means you're using your unit circle.
Oh, so we can't use the unit circle?
Yes, you can use your unit circle on the test if you made it prior to the test. And it is laminated.
What if it's because I have mine, just not. It's in my spot.
Why didn't you turn it in? And that sucks for you. Alright, so if you have your unit circle, we're going to do a quick example of what kind of problem you would see on your test involving the unit circle. Okay, so what a problem could ask you for is to find trig values of 120 degrees. Okay? So it would tell me to find the trig values of 120 degrees. If it told me to do that, then I would go to my unit circle and find 120 degrees. What are the coordinates for 120 degrees? Okay? So looking at my unit circle, it would be negative 1/2 and square root of 3 over 2. The x value represents what? I heard someone say it. Don't say? Good job. Your x value is your, did you say cosine or sine? I hope you said cosine.
Cosine.
Okay. Alright, your x value is your cosine. And your y value is your sine. It's alphabetical. X, Y, C, S. Okay? Your x is your cosine, your y is your sine. So as long as I know x and y, I can find every other trig value. Because the relationship is, if I'm looking for cosecant, cosecant is related to who? Sine. It's the reciprocal of sine. So the cosecant would equal
2.
Can I have 2 over the square root of 3? No. So I have to do what?
You gotta do at the bottom, you gotta do to the top, Sean.
No.
I don't know what he just said. I have to ratify it. I have to multiply it by the square root of 3. So what do I end up with? 2 square root of 3 over 3. So now I know the cosecant. Then if it said to find the secant, secant is the reciprocal of who? Cosine. So if it's negative 1 over 2, then it's going to be negative 2. Am I done? Yep. I don't need to simplify. I don't need to ratify. It's negative 2. Then if it asks me for the tangent, what if it asks me for the tangent? Does anyone remember the relationship between tangent, sine, and cosine?
Tangent equals.
I put them together, but how do I put them together? Tangent is your sine divided by your cosine. So what's my sine? And my cosine is? How do we divide fractions? Now you can see it, Javon.
Oh, you do the bottom, you do to the top.
No. I was hoping you would. No, you keep the numerator.
Oh, you keep the numerator.
Oh yeah, you keep the numerator.
Change the operation.
Change the operation.
And then you
And
flip.
the denominator.
There we go. What happens to my 2's? So my answer is just negative.
Why is it negative?
Because there's a negative 2 right there.
Girl, y'all gonna have to change. Y'all see the ranges around here.
I'm gonna sit in the back. I'm alright. I can't see nothing.
Why don't you just switch seats with Brandy?
Who?
You.
Nah, this shit gonna be my way. Good. Maybe you can't see that.
All right. So then the other ones would be, what am I missing? Cotangent. Last one would be cotangent. How would I find cotangent? Cotangent is the reciprocal of who?
It's the reciprocal of tangent.
It's the reciprocal of tangent, right? So if I know what tangent is, instead of being negative square root of 3, it would become what? So it would become negative 1 over the square root of 3. Can I have that?
No.
How do I get rid of that? I ratify. Girls. So I end up with negative square root of 3 over 3.
Baby, just
Okay?
cross me out there.
How many questions?
And so if you can't remember that, it's also cosine over sine. Because that's the reciprocal here, right? Instead of sine over cosine, it would become cosine over sine. And that's why you need your unit circle for your test. All right, you have 25 questions.
And I hope, I pray to God.
22 of them are multiple choice, and 3 of them are free response.
Do we need to know about positive sign and cosine points? How we have to determine the graph?
You have your unit circle for that.
How many you said?
No, I just heard positive.
You know what we did yesterday, right? When we determined the graph by positive sign and
The shapes?
yeah.
Yeah.
Is that gonna be on the test?
Well, you got it.
Yeah. That's why I gave you the actual review to practice that. All right. Any questions over what your test is over?
What is it? What is working?
So on number 7, theta, like, so if that's in the test, like if it says theta on there,
If it said sine theta, to graph it, you would put sine of x. That's all. I'm just
so you
like,
just put the sign of then x and then whatever else.
yeah. But and just notice not to put theta in the calculator, because that was one of the biggest mistakes people made last year. They're like, Miss, I couldn't even get the graph. And I'm like,
Oh, because they couldn't find theta.
when they should have just put in.
Well, I walked like so the boys, but we ended up trying to teach.